Hello everyone. Parashat Lech Lecha is an action-packed Sedra, literally so. It continues a series, our cycle of ignominious firsts. In Parashat Bereshit, we saw the first murder. In Parashat Noach, we saw the first drunkenness. And in Parashat Lech Lecha, we see the first war. We open Parashat Lech Lecha with God's call to Avraham. Avraham goes to the land of Canaan and then leaves Canaan due to famine, travelling to Egypt, where he passes his wife Sarai off as his sister. Avraham emerges from Egypt with great wealth, if not the best of reputations. We then learn that Avraham separates from his nephew Lot, and then we have the war between the 4 kings and the 5 kings. Lot gets captured during the course of the war. Avraham goes and rescues him, and after this interlude, the Sedra's main narrative arc resumes, with God promising Avraham's offspring the land of Israel in the Brit Ben Habatarim, and we then hear of tensions between Sarai and her maidservant Hagar and Hagar's son Yishmael, Hagar and Avraham's son Yishmael, before rounding the Sedra off with Brit Milah. I want to focus on the story of the war of the 4 kings against the 5 kings and its aftermath, because on a basic reading of the Sedra, the whole story seems unnecessary. It adds nothing to the narrative flow, and it just breaks up the story of how Avraham goes from Ur Kasdim to being Av Hamon Goyim. Taken in the round, not just the story of the 4 kings and the 5 kings and the whole story of the battle, just the whole story, everything that is told to us in chapter 14 of Bereshit seems superfluous. We know that it's there for a reason, so let's see if we can figure out what that reason is. And there are a number of reasons given by the sages. To give you some examples, Midrash Tanchuma picks up on the idea that Avraham is demonstrating the importance of freeing captives. Lot is held captive, and he demonstrates the importance to it by becoming this man of action. The Ar HaChaim goes further by pointing out that not only does Avraham go out to rescue Lot, but he doesn't even need to negotiate with the captors, and the Ar HaChaim posits that that's because he knows that the captors have only taken Lot to reach Avraham, so there's absolutely no point in Avraham negotiating with them. Others pick up on the circuitous route that Avraham takes to go and rescue Lot. We're told how far north he goes and then comes round, and they note that this encompasses much of the biblical land of Israel and serves as a demonstration of our national boundaries. Rabbi Menachem Liebtag points out that it's symbolic that Avraham has conquered the land, and that foreshadows what we as a nation will do later on to conquer the land. And this idea of Maseh Avot Simon Labanim, that the acts of the fathers are a sign for the later generations, is something that comes up time and time again, particularly in this early part of Sefer Bereshit. And the way in which we understand this is that we will conquer the land because Avraham did so. In other words, whatever the forefathers do, it becomes our national destiny to copy them. The third explanation is maybe it's just a story that is told to demonstrate Avraham's physical military might, because the Torah wants us to see Avraham not just as a spiritually great man, but politically, physically, militarily as a strong leader as well. We know even now that some leaders like to be seen both as great politicians and action men. Think Lahavdil Elef Havdallas, think of Kim Jong-un, think of Vladimir Putin, and maybe the idea here is similar. It's some kind of Avraham manifesto. The problem is, for me at least, that none of these explanations really convince me. They all seem apologetic. They give nice reasons why it isn't really a problem that this chapter 14 is where it is, and the story of the 4 kings and the 5 kings is where it is, but none of them persuade me, let's try that one again, none of them persuade me, better, that their explanation is reason enough for the whole chapter to be there in the first place. So instead I'd like to suggest an additional reason why the Torah includes the story of the war of the 4 kings against 5 kings here where it does, and what it adds to the story of Avraham. And I think it's all to do with Lot. And what do we know of Lot? Well, we know that Lot is Avram's nephew, that he lives with Avram after his father dies, because Avram, his uncle, takes him under his wing, and from the beginning of Avram's travels, Lot travels with him. I don't even think it's a stretch to say that, certainly for the period whilst Avram remains childless, Lot is the obvious heir to Avram's legacy. And yet, as soon as Avraham, Sarai and Lot come back from Egypt, the Torah tells us that there is tension between Avraham and Lot's shepherds, and they have to separate. So the obvious question becomes what happens in Egypt. And for those of us that have read this week's news sheet, we know that there is this connection between the wealth and the separation. And that's one of two things I think that jump out of us. First, Avram leaves Egypt wealthy, seriously wealthy. Indeed, there's one way of reading it that the whole story of Avram and Sarai in Egypt is so traumatic for Pharaoh that Pharaoh just says, yeah, take what you want, just go, just be gone with you, take everyone and just get out, and he pays him off to get out. And I do agree that I think it's hard to see that there's no causal link between Lot suddenly feeling he's heir to a sizable fortune and the breakdown in relations. But there's a second point. And the second point is that in the whole story of Sarai, Avram, Pharaoh, when Avram tells Pharaoh that Sarai is his sister and not his wife, Lot, who knows the truth, says nothing. Now, we couldn't imagine Avram being silent in the face of such behaviour and duplicity, even if it's just to take someone aside and say, look, what's going on here? But Lot is no Avram. Now let's fast forward to when they separate. When Avram and Lot separate, Avram offers Lot the choice of going left or right. And Lot chooses to go east to Sodom. Now, this doesn't jar to us on first sight because we think on a north-south axis normally. And so we look on left and right as east or west. Left or west or east, depending which way round you go. But Targum Onkelos points out that Avram and Lot don't live on a north-south axis. They live on an east-west axis. So therefore, going left or right means going north or south. And so, faced with the choice of going north or south, Lot goes east. All of a sudden, the choice is jarring. Now, why has he done this? Well, maybe Lot is just doing this to needle Avram. If we're right that their relationship is almost a parent-child one, how often does a child do something just to wind up their parents? Maybe Lot is saying he's rejecting anything Avram has to offer him. We're told that he goes to Sodom, and we're then told that Sodom is really, really wicked. So it's a really bad choice. Certainly in the eyes of Avram. So maybe Lot goes to Sodom just to upset Avram, and it doesn't really matter that it's north, south, east or west. He just wants to find somewhere that's really going to upset Avram. Or maybe Lot is going to Sodom for no reason other than it's lush and it's well watered and it reminds him of Egypt. This is in line with Pasuk Yud Gimel, Perik Yud Gimel, Pasuk Yud 13:10, that mentions that Sodom is like Egypt. Rabbi Raymond Harari, in the fall 1989 issue of Tradition, picks up on this point and suggests that Avram's east-west axis is difficult and precarious. Life along it, or Avram living on the east-west axis, so offering the choice of the north-south, in that corridor, life is difficult and precarious. It's an existence, there's a mountain range there, and it's an existence in which water is scarce, and one's existence and survival is dependent on God providing. Whereas Egypt is well watered, it has the Nile, it has regular flooding, one is less at risk. Life is less dependent on God's favour in Egypt. Avram accepts, perhaps unwillingly, that he and Lot have to separate for Shalom Bayis, but can't comprehend that Lot is going to choose a different way in life, that Lot is going to want to live an existence which is one other than being subject to God's grace. In this sense, Avram is therefore blinkered and naive, because Lot has seen that the grass is greener on the other side. He's seen how lush it is in Egypt, what a different way of life is like, and he doesn't want to worry about spirituality, prayer, fragility. He just wants the good life and he wants it now. He wants instant gratification, so he chooses Sodom. Whatever the reason for Avram and Lot's separation, though, and for Lot going to Sodom, it's against this background that Lot gets captured and Avram rescues him. And here, at the moment of rescue, when they are together, and Avraham has effected this great military victory, at this great climax moment where if it was a movie, they'd be reconciled and ride off together into the sunset, Lot again says nothing. Why? Well, maybe Lot says nothing this time because he is so traumatized. Maybe he's so traumatized by what he saw of Avraham in Egypt that Lot can't reconcile the two, of how Avraham can be righteous, yet can lie, yet can do these amazing military feats. How can he cheat Pharaoh, demean his own wife, and then come in as the great saviour? And maybe by staying silent, Lot is reminding Avraham that he, Lot, stayed silent before, and he can't forgive or forget what Avram's done. Maybe Lot says nothing for the same reason he said nothing in Egypt at all, that it's a silent ambivalence. Maybe Lot is an individual with no moral scruples. Imagine Lot. The one thing we know of him is he lives in Sodom. Well, the paradigm of Sodom, of the culture of Sodom, as we're told in Avot, at 5:10, is shali shali v'shalach shalach. What's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. It's a culture of disinterest. It's a culture of do what you want so long as it doesn't hurt me. So, in such a worldview, what Avram does in Egypt isn't of any comment for Lot, because it doesn't impact on Lot directly. But by the same token, such a person is assuming that the only reason Avram would go to such lengths to wheel out his personal army and to travel halfway across the country to rescue him is because there's something in it for Avram. As such, there's no word of thanks necessary for saving me, because you saved me not to save me, but you saved me for your own ends. So it doesn't even enter Lot's mind, if we follow this chain of thought, that Avram should have acted selflessly. What I like about this concept is there's a mirroring here of blinkered naivety. The same way that Avram couldn't get his head into Lot's way of thinking when offering the choice of going left or right, so too, in this idea, Lot can't get his head around Avram's way of thinking of acting selflessly to save him. Either way, whichever of these the previous options we accept, the point is that nothing has changed within Lot. The Lot who left Avram to go to Sodom for the easy life, the party life, is unchanged. He hasn't learned anything from his time there or from his captivity. But let's compare that with Avram's behaviour, because Avram seems, I think, to have learnt his lesson from Egypt. This time, he won't take anything from the king of Sodom by way of gift or payment for the rescue. And this contrasts with the wealth with which he leaves Egypt. If we're right, then, it seems to me that the primary purpose of this chapter, the story of the 4 kings and the 5 kings and Avram's the rescue of Lot, is to show that Avram has learnt his lesson and has evolved. When he hears that Lot is captured, he doesn't worry, first and foremost, the way he does in the story of Egypt, of what about me, what about Avram, what about my own skin? How am I going to concoct some story that's going to protect me and means that I'm not going to get attacked? He doesn't sit idly by. He just goes straight in. He's straight into the action. And again, as we've seen, when it comes to the end of the story with Lot being rescued, he won't accept any payment, unlike what happens in Egypt. To quote from Rabbi Joel Wolowelsky, who's a Rav in Flatbush, a writer, thinker, and exegete, particularly on the thought and writings of the Rav Soloveitchik and Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, he says, one cannot help but see tremendous transformational growth in Avram's response, and one cannot help but understand that if there's room for growth in Avram, then there is no excuse for our not always trying to reach higher in our own lives. I think, according to Rabbi Joel Wolowelsky, and according to the thesis I've just put forward, that chapter 14 of Bereshit, the story of the 4 kings and the 5 kings and its aftermath, teaches us that Avram learns from his past mistakes and won't repeat them. And if we understand it that way, we can also come full circle and add extra weight to at least 2 of the 3 reasons we gave initially why chapter 14 is there in the first place. First of all, it paints Avram around as an all-round leader, as a strong leader, who's not just physically strong, not just spiritually strong, but so strong that he learns from his own mistakes and doesn't repeat them. And secondly, if we go down the line of Maseh Avot Siman Labanim, that the deeds of the ancestors are there to show the destiny of future generations, it's a hugely positive message, because Avraham learns from his mistakes. So too, inevitably, we will learn from our mistakes as well. In summary, like Lot, we are given a choice every day of how we face the world around us, how we interact with people, what we do for our community, what we do for each other. The message of our parasha, I think, is clear. I hope that we are all strong enough to make the right choices. Shabbat Shalom.